Hey everybody, my name is Rita Sharma. I am from KaushalyaUk, a women empowerment organization. And we are here today with Daniela Wolfe, a burnout coach and self-care strategist, who is going to show us um, how to deal with burnout if you're experiencing it. And she's going to share some wonderful techniques with us that are going to be useful for us to deal with burnout or steer clear from it. Uh, so a little bit about Daniela. I'm sure she'll tell us a little bit more about herself before she gets into the actual workshop. She's burnout coach and self-care strategist, as I said. She's a full-time working mom of two kids. Kudos. Daniela's purpose is to empower all women to develop the skills to help them find peace, balance, and bliss in their lives. At KaushalyaUk, we welcome everyone with peace, love, harmony, and positivity. We have Daniela today here with us to share some wonderful knowledge and experience that she's been working around. Can I request everybody to stay on mute? And towards the end, we will have the last 15 minutes for question and answers. And I want to acknowledge Zina Kula before we move on, who has worked to organize this workshop for us, but unfortunately could not be here with us today for personal circumstances. But that's absolutely fine. She'll be back. And I want to say a big thank you to her as well. And Daniela, now the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much for having me today. Thank you for that introduction. Like you said, I'm a full-time working mom. I've been a social worker for the last 27 years, so I am definitely professionally trained in all things mindset, mindfulness, coping skills, stress management, self-care, all those types of things, as well as a mom of two. Granted, my kids are older now. They're about 22 and 17. But when they were younger, about 4 and 6 months old, I went through a divorce. And so I was a single working mom of two, trying to do it all, be it all. And I definitely hit that place of burnout myself. I got to a place where I wasn't maybe asking for help the way I should have. I wasn't taking care of myself the way I should have. And I noticed I was snapping more. I was yelling a little bit more. I didn't have the patience I wanted to have. And I kind of hit a place and had a moment where I realized this isn't who I was. This wasn't who I wanted my kids to know and grow up remembering that, mom just always yelled and things like that. And so I started to kind of practice what I preach, what I teach so many other people to do when it came to taking the time to manage my stress. I started going to a local gym and using the childcare there. And it was definitely work to reframe that guilt of putting my kids in childcare for an hour while I went and used the gym. We had free childcare at our grocery store, and taking that time for myself, as well as giving them a little break from me, I found not only was good for me, but it was good for them. We came back together. We were all kind of re-energized. We were able to share stories about what happened. I started a daily gratitude practice. And so it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a one and done. But I realized over time, not only, like I said, was I showing up better for them, better at work, but people were noticing these changes and asking me, what was I doing? How did I fit these things in? As well as, sending me pictures and memes of like, I did this because of something I said, and realized I think as women, we're all looking for that validation and permission to take that time for ourselves, that it's okay to do these things. And so that's kind of where Bestie Life was born, and able, to want to share this with as many women and people as I possibly can, because I think over time, our culture has gone to a place of extreme hustle, extreme productivity at the expense of our health and well-being, both physically, mentally, and emotionally. And so that's kind of where then I think we've gotten to a place of burnout. And definitely, I feel like burnout is so important to talk about because we normalize these things. We just kind of accept them like, this is what our life is like. This is what it takes to work and raise a family and do all these different things. And I don't believe that's the case. I think there's a different way. And I think by taking a step back and learning to recognize the signs of burnout, understanding how it's affecting us, and taking simple, actionable steps to start reversing that, as well as preventing and maintaining that healthier way of life, is so possible. So I'm just going to share my screen. I have some slides to share. Kind of keeps me on track because I love talking about this. So I could go off on tangents and take up 2 hours of your life, but I don't want to do that. So let me just get this in present mode. I love technology, right? At least when it works. So like I said, I call this reigniting, recognizing and preventing burnout, because I think information is our best tool to being able to make change. And so as the first part of that, I think burnout can become one of those buzzwords we just use, when somebody asks how you're doing, oh my gosh, I'm so tired, I'm so burnt out, almost kind of like self-care can get overused as well. But definitely there's like a set criteria that really can create a distinction between being busy, being stressed, and being burned out. And so burnout is really a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion that comes from prolonged periods of stress and overwork. And it's definitely that prolonged period that kind of separates it, because I think we all have seasons where we're a little bit busier, there's a little bit more going on, the kids might have more activities, work might be a little bit more stressful. And those seasons might be one thing, but really having it prolonged for an extreme period of time is where it can negatively impact your physical health, mental health, your relationships with others. So basically, every part of your life can be affected by burnout if we don't take the steps necessary in order to address it. And so how can you tell if you're at risk of burnout? Because like I said, we all kind of just use that word in a very general sense, but there are some very specific things to kind of keep an eye out for to help distinguish it from just general stress and busyness. The first one is feeling drained and exhausted. And this doesn't mean maybe you had a bad night's sleep or a couple of bad nights, or you've been really running extra, but it's more that case of you've had a great night's sleep, you're doing just your normal activities, and you're still waking up feeling super tired, super lethargic. And so maybe you're having trouble focusing and concentrating and things like that. You've lost interest in some of your daily activities. You're just not excited anymore. You're kind of apathetic when it comes to going out and doing even fun things. And so that interest and motivation is kind of disintegrating. Feeling overwhelmed and helpless. It's like you're drowning in your work and personal responsibilities. You don't feel like you have any control over life. Things get added to your plate without you even being asked, maybe, or having a say. And so that could be a sign that you're at risk of a burnout. You have that increased cynicism or negativity, maybe even more than usual. You find it hard to stay positive, not only about your work or home, but just in general. Your productivity goes down. And I think sometimes we think when we add more things, we're going to be more productive, or when we're multitasking. But again, if you're finding it hard to get your work done, you're making more mistakes than usual, that can be another sign that you're experiencing some burnout. And the last one is physical symptoms. It could be headaches, stomach aches, some immunization problems, heart conditions, things like that come from really draining yourself at that capacity, are all signs that you're heading towards a burnout. And so, like I said, the two main areas that we talk about it affecting you are work and home. And so I think it's so important to talk about, because if you start recognizing these things, there's definitely actions you can take, whether it's setting boundaries, practicing self-care, getting supports from friends, as well as from a coach or a counselor. And I'll definitely talk more about those as we go along. But definitely, recognizing how it can affect you at work, such as from having maybe a heavy workload, not having control over what types of things you're doing at your job, or not having enough support from your colleagues or supervisors, are all things that can kind of contribute to possible workplace burnout. And so that could look like, again, that exhaustion, that cynicism, that reduced productivity. Your effectiveness is going to go down, your creativity is going to go down, as well as that physical and mental health issues like headaches, anxiety, depression. And these things then affect employee recidivism rates if they stay at that job. They affect healthcare leaves and things like that. So it's really important to keep an eye on that. The next area is how it affects you at home. Granted, you can't take a sick leave from your life at home, but recognizing if you're feeling overwhelmed by the demands of daily life, such as having too many household responsibilities or feeling like you're the only person managing them, caring for family members. I know I'm at a place where while my kids may be older and leaving, my parents now have some issues and some physical things that need some help. Balancing my personal needs with the needs of everybody else and finding that time for myself can be hard when I feel like I need to be available to everybody else. And so you get to that place of emotional and physical exhaustion, detachment, again, from your day-to-day life, and that cynicism, like it's never going to get any better. And so part of why we want to talk about this is recognizing it is the first step to being able to stop it, take some action, make some changes, and pivot how it's going to affect your day-to-day life. So some of the symptoms based on how it can affect you and work at home is whether it's depersonalization or detachment. The first one, depersonalization, looks at you're disconnected from your surroundings. You don't have any emotions, thoughts, or kind of physical sensations when you're in certain places. You're just kind of like going through the motions. You're kind of numb. You just kind of are there, but you don't feel engaged. You don't feel motivated because you don't feel like it's really about you. It's a place you go, you do your things, but you don't feel connected to it in that same way. Detachment, again, you have that lack of empathy and interest in the experiences that you're participating in. You maybe have a hard time maintaining relationships in those situations, which can be really hard if you're at home because that's your place of being with your family, being with the people you want to have those close relationships with. And it can make it hard to provide effective care or be effective work-wise in those situations if you feel completely detached from the outcome. You feel like, what's the point? It doesn't matter. Another symptom is that extreme mental exhaustion. And so you kind of have that lack of motivation, hard time concentrating, sadness, anxiety. And so this is where it can start to cross the line from just stress and burnout to a mental health diagnosis. And so definitely having that awareness, talking to someone, whether even if just friends, families, we're going to talk about communication and how important that is in this as we go along. But definitely, when you get to that mental place, you just don't always have that enthusiasm. Like I shared in my story, I was snapping more, I was yelling more. I just was so tired. I just didn't have the patience either. And then the last one is that physical exhaustion. And so you might not have any energy left, any vitality. You might have a hard time sleeping. And sleeping is so critical to our overall well-being. I think it gets underestimated and undersold as a priority. But then when we start to experience physical symptoms such as headaches, muscle tensions, chronic fatigue, chronic pain, that's where we might lead to more of a medical solution. But recognizing from how we're using our time, how we're planning our day can help us then create that work-life balance, because that's something that's obviously out of alignment when we're experiencing all of this. So whether you call it work-life balance, work-life harmony, there's so many different ways to say it, but it's all about feeling like you're not compromising in either area of your life. So how to prevent burnout. And I know there's a lot of information. Please definitely ask me questions at the end when we get to that point, because I definitely want to make sure you feel like this is something that works for you, that you have a handle on, that isn't just general for somebody else. So when it comes to starting to prevent burnout, you want to kind of have your own check-in and understanding the systems that you're currently working within at your home and at work. Who does what? That's always kind of the biggest thing. There's a book I read called Fair Play by Eve Rodsky, and it kind of gives an overview of that invisible load that so many women and moms carry, whether it's at their job, in their homes, those things that are just assumed that we're going to take care of, or that we feel like if we don't do it, nobody else will. And it even breaks down at one point the fact that there's 3 different levels to every task that happens. And even when we say, ask somebody at work or ask our partner to help us with a task, That's that execution, that carrying out of making things happen. But unfortunately, prior to that, there's two other steps. There's the awareness, which is even recognizing something needs to happen, or as well as then the planning of deciding how it's going to happen. So even when we ask somebody, hey, can you do this for me? Can you help me with this? They're only taking over that last step, and we haven't let go of those first two pieces of having the awareness and planning to begin with. And so kind of educating, talking, learning about all of this is how we start to then create a society where we don't have to keep those first two steps. We can then transition it. So knowing who does what, how much are you taking on? Like I said, are you still keeping those first two steps, or have you completely delegated to somebody else all of those pieces? Is the expectation real, or is it just what you've allowed to happen? Sometimes I think things happen and the expectation isn't necessarily realistic to sustain over time. And so being able to take a step back from it allows us to maybe dismantle and let go of certain things, to break down. I don't know if you're familiar with the Eisenhower's matrix of tasks being important and urgent, important but not urgent, urgent but not important, and completely not important and not urgent, and realizing where in that matrix do your daily tasks fall. That's a whole different conversation as well, but definitely a lot of this information too, if you go to my website, you'll be able to see there's resources, there's blog posts, there's podcasts that'll help break a lot of this down for you as well. So then back to your self-assessment, looking at, again, can you avoid or reduce the risk of bad systems? Sometimes I think we get in some bad habits, and maybe, it comes to maybe how we organize our home. So we're always losing our keys. We're always running late. Maybe we're not planning our meals. And so we're always on the fly every night, feeling like we don't have any idea of what's going on. We don't have a plan. And so there's certain areas, certain systems, certain habits in our day that we can look at. Where are we getting tripped up, and how can we maybe intentionally do something different accordingly to make that part of our day feel a little bit less stressful? And then at the last one for home, there's definitely a lot of things in your home setting that I think we have a little bit more control over than at a work setting, that we can start to implement some changes, as well as, if possible in the work setting, but I know sometimes that part can be hard. And so some of the strategies we're going to cover include prioritizing your self-care, setting boundaries, looking at your support, managing your workload, taking breaks, practicing mindfulness, learning time management skills, and kind of being aware of, in these different areas, self-care. I started to share with Ritu prior to recording. I think it's so much more than just spa days and massages and bubble baths. It's everything from the way we sleep, the way we connect with others, the way we think about money, the way we decorate and organize our home, how we dress, how we move, how we eat. There's so many ways to practice your self-care throughout your day. And by prioritizing that throughout your day, every day, is going to make a sustainable system and habit to prevent burnout. Boundaries. It's not just about what you say no to, it's about what you say yes to. And having clear boundaries that you communicate is going to be so important in not overworking, not taking on too much. So that goes to then managing your workload as well. Taking breaks, making sure you are finding that time, whether it's 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night. Someone had shared earlier, they are taking a walk every day, taking those breaks, and then practicing that mindfulness, which is just being present, noticing maybe the sun is out, noticing nature around you. What do you smell? What have you tasted today? What do you hear around you? That act of being present gets rid of our future stress, our past stress, and allows us to just stay in that moment. And then again, that time management, and that's such a big part. There's a whole, again, series of things that I help my clients with when it comes to time management, so that you're not only getting done the things you need to get done, but with some ease and breathing room throughout your day, so that you either have the space for life to happen, because it's going to happen and things don't always go as planned, or then you have that gap built in between activities so that you can take some self-care. You can do some things for yourself. So where can you start right now? Because that's always the part we want to get to, right? It's like, okay, I know these things. I know I don't feel great. I know this isn't right, but I want to fix it now. And so it's not about hacks all the time. I know we can see those life hacks. We all read some tips and tricks and things like that. But one-time hack is not sustainable. It's not going to provide a long-term solution. And everyone's stress comes from a different place and different source. So there's going to be different solutions for each person based on where your stress is coming from. And so, again, part of that awareness of what we just talked about, I know very quickly, as far as recognizing where your stress and burnout is coming from, is going to help you be more intentional when it comes to planning your solution and knowing how to do that. And so definitely addressing your guilt and expectations. And we're going to cover these in the next couple slides, but addressing your guilt and expectations, planning less, creating habits, communicating, and setting some boundaries. Boundaries is my favorite B word you'll learn, by the way. So looking at guilt and expectations, you need to know what you need and ask for it long term. Hiring a babysitter for one night, that's great, but that's not going to fix your problem long term. You need to be able to come up with a solution that's going to solve the bigger issue, not just make you feel better at the moment. So learning maybe restoration, what used to feel good to you, and how do you get back there again? I know, even unfortunately, I did this as well. When I became a mom, when I was working, I let go of my habits that I had fun with. I let go of my hobbies. I let go of the things that brought me joy, and bringing those back into your life is so important. But definitely the guilt part of, well, I should be doing this, letting go of the shoulds of what you think other people expect of you, whether it's your kids, your boss, your partner, and just society's judgment in general, is so important to taking care of you and knowing what you need. You need more rest, more water, more joy from those fun and hobbies. Maybe you need more food. Sometimes I think we just forget some of the basics of what can help recharge us. And then taking, like I said, time out, letting go of the shoulds and the shame is the first step in that part of it. We do a lot of mindset work with my clients to help let go of those stereotypes, those expectations, the negative, what I call the mean girls in my head, that are being so much harsher to me than I would ever say to anybody else, or that I would let a girlfriend be to themselves. We need to be able to reframe that conversation that is constantly ongoing in our head. The next is to plan less. I think we have a hard time seeing our time as valuable if we're not being productive, if we're not doing something, if we're not busy. And so when it comes to planning less, it's very intentional, and it gives you some of that control back by allowing you to prioritize what really matters, what is important. Instead of trying to do everything, you can really just prioritize 1, 2, I would say at max 3 things each day that are really important. And again, it's part of the Eisenhower matrix, but then it helps you avoid overcommitting. And you're mindful then of the number of things and responsibilities that you're taking on, because that overcommitment is absolutely where a lot of that burnout comes in. And so by saying no, setting some of those boundaries, even if it's as simple as, I don't respond to emails after 5 o'clock. It's by communicating that and having a clear boundary, you're actually not letting anybody down. You're setting a very clear expectation. I love to use the example of, if you were going to a grocery store or somewhere, you'd want to know what their hours are so you don't show up and they're closed every time. By communicating what the boundaries are, when the availability is, allows the freedom for everybody else to plan and work with you in a great way. Simplifying it. I think we can make things really overcomplicated more so than they need to be. Food doesn't always need to be fancy. The way we decorate and organize, the simpler, the better. We have a lot of clutter. We have a lot of things. And so when we make those things simpler, when we have systems around it, we can kind of be more efficient with that. Scheduling our downtime. I plan it in my calendar the same way I plan a doctor's appointment, a business meeting, or even plans with friends. That downtime to help you recharge and reinvigorate is just as important as any other meeting or things that you put in your schedule. And so by putting it in there, you're more accountable to actually making sure that it happens rather than just waiting until there's magically free time, because I don't know about you, but that never happens in my life without being more intentional. Practicing mindfulness, like I said, being aware, being present. I love using breathing as a tool for mindfulness, because I saw this quote once that said, you can't take a past breath and you can't take a future breath. You can only take a present breath. And so when you focus on your breathing, it really helps you be in the moment. And so it's a great way to just be and let go of anything that's worrying you or stressing you out, because most of those things are either in the past or in the future. And then next is seeking support, whether it's from your loved ones, colleagues, mental health professionals, a coach, a counselor. Having that support in place is huge when it comes to managing your burnout. I think self-care, we take the word self and we think it means it needs to happen in isolation, and that's so not the case. It can be laughing with others. It can be engaging with others. Having that support in place, let's go with the isolation. Let's go with the stigma. Let's go with the negativity, and can help reframe the way you look at a situation. And so by planning less, you create more space for yourself, for your self-care. Next is creating habits. And habits, sometimes we don't even realize half of the things we do are habits, whether it's brushing our teeth, the routine we have when it comes to making our coffee, getting our lunch, getting our kids out the door. All these things, the more we create habits around them, the more we can get rid of decision fatigue, which allows our brain the space and energy we need to then focus on things at another time. They say that's why Steve Jobs always wore a black turtleneck and jeans, because then he didn't have to think about what he was going to wear that day. So, having habits can be very, very positive when it comes to creating systems to make sure things are going to happen every single time the way we need them to, but they can also be negative. And so we need to be aware of if we get stuck in, like I had mentioned earlier, some of those negative routines and negative habits by maybe not planning, by not having a system that was going to work for us. So by intentionally planning those healthy habits, we can better manage our stress, build resilience, and prevent burnout from kind of getting a hold on you. You just need a quick water. And my favorite part of habits is the fact that you can add them on to so many different things. There's a book, Atomic Habits by James Clear. If you haven't read it, it's fantastic when it talks about habit stacking, keeping them small, adding them onto things you're already doing. It's not about these massive lifestyle shifts and overhauls. It's about adding one new thing to something you're already doing. Maybe you're grabbing your morning coffee. You can either put a full glass of water next to it, so you're adding more water to your day. You can stop, smell it, do some aromatherapy, some deep breathing. There's so many ways to add to what you're already doing. And those simple little habits, as you add them up over your day, become a self-care practice. So some of the steps, like I said in the last slide, to develop those positive habits, like I said, start small, build them gradually, decide what you want to do and be super specific. So it's not just, I'm going to go to the gym more this week. It's, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week for a half hour. That makes it more measurable and actionable versus that broader goal. The more specific you can be, the greater likelihood that it's actually going to happen. And so then you can break it down into specific steps when it's more smaller, when it's more attainable, because then you know, I'm going to go for a half an hour Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Now you've got specific steps, specific days. And so when you set up reminders or an accountability partner, that's also going to help make sure you do it. Sometimes I have a girlfriend, she specifically hires a trainer because she knows she'll have to go to the gym because she paid for the trainer. And so having, whether it's a reminder in your phone, somebody you're meeting up with is a great way to help you make sure those habits happen. And then the last is you repeat it again and again and again. That's why they call it a practice, because it's not going to happen the first time. It's not always maybe going to be perfect that first week, that first month, but with repetition, you're going to build a system, and then it's automated and you don't even think about it anymore. Communicating with others. I think we hide so many different things, whether it's on social media, at work, with the people around us. We're just not always honest because we're afraid of being vulnerable. We're afraid of being judged. We're afraid of being seen as maybe even incompetent, like, oh my God, if they're burnt out, how are they going to handle this? How are they going to manage their job? How are they doing things with their kids? And I think, though, we actually get our strength from our vulnerability, and our ability to share those things helps us to be stronger, because then we're connected, then we're supported, and then we're not alone trying to do it all by ourselves. And so, like it says, promotes that supportive and collaborative environment when you collaborate, reduces that isolation, and it helps you to prioritize your self-care and well-being, because even if we don't think of ourselves, you're thinking of your girlfriend or your spouse or your family member when they're going through hard times, and you're going to reach out and be like, hey, can I help? Why don't you take a break and I'll do this for you? And so when we communicate with others what we're going through and what we need, they're going to help support us in taking care of ourselves, whether it's going to that doctor's appointment we've been putting off, or just taking 10, 15 minutes to go for a walk during lunch. It's also important to communicate with ourselves, because I think as well, we try and just keep going and going and going without really addressing what we need in order to take care of ourselves. So making sure, like I said, whether you're prioritizing on your calendar activities that you have to do, being kind and compassionate when yourself, even when things don't go as planned. That's where the mean girls in your head can kind of pop up, and you need that mindset shift of being able to speak to yourself like you would speak to anybody else, because unfortunately we can be way crueler. And so knowing that, you have that non-negotiable me time, you're doing things that make you happy, those habits, those hobbies, all those kind of things is, again, how you communicate with yourself is part of all of that as well. And then, like I said, my favorite B word is boundaries, because I think, my notes just fell. Boundaries can get a bad rap. And I think boundaries are awesome because they not only, like I said, help communicate when you're available, so that not only when people approach you are you present as your best self, but I think other people then are also just as happy to have the best version of you. And so rather than having any resentment, being overtired, overcommitting, it provides that equilibrium to have a great exchange with whatever work or activity or thing that you're engaged in. So boundaries help you establish kind of your daily practices as those non-negotiables. So whether it's my 5 a.m. time during the week is my time, and I've gotten in, my family knows, like, even if there's something going on that next morning, I'm still going to be up, or especially at nights, that's more where it's like, I need 20 minutes before I go to bed to read, whether it's 3 pages, 3 chapters, whatever. My family knows, don't talk to me after I'm laying in bed and getting my book out. And it's a boundary, it's a friendly boundary, but they know that's kind of my downtime. That's how I de-stress. So by being intentional and deliberate, there's no blame, there's no guilt. They're not going to be mad at me because they kind of already know, yep, mom's doing her nighttime reading. When you're clear about what you're willing and not willing to do, it doesn't let anybody down, because they know, okay, she's not available, I'm going to seek out somebody else. And it gives other people options and the power to pivot that they wouldn't have had if you didn't tell them what your boundaries were. As well, it allows you to create more routines of things that make you happy, more joy, because you're now including it into a built-in part of your schedule that you've shared with everybody as a boundary, as something you've communicated with. And so lastly, where to start? There were a lot of different things. I know I covered a lot of material in this. Definitely feel free to rewind certain parts of it, reach out to me with any specific questions about what you think that might look like for you, because I definitely think, that self-care part, knowing that self-care is not selfish, is huge. By taking care of yourself, getting enough rest, eating healthy meals, engaging in activities that bring you joy and relaxation are going to help you give back to everybody else. It's kind of a cliche phrase, but you can't pour from an empty cup. And so self-care gives back to everybody else tenfold by taking the time to do that. And like I said, if you want to see how I talk about it and teach it, there's some free resources on my website, because I think it just gives a different, more approachable way. I like to call it practical self-care that you can use every day. Setting boundaries, even if it's a small boundary. I know people are so afraid to start saying no to people because we feel guilty we don't want to offend anyone. Start with something small. Hey, can you make the coffee tomorrow? No. Something small, easy in your household. Start with a family member, someone you're comfortable with, setting a boundary, whether you can steal mine. I'm not available the last 20 minutes before I go to bed because I'm reading. Set a small boundary, because people are going to test you to see how real is that? How firm are you going to stay with that? And so it's a practice to get comfortable setting those boundaries, but it's a great place to start. And then communicating it. They all kind of work together. And then the last is those habits. Pick something small. I love water habit because it's the smallest and easiest to implement. I tell my clients, set a timer for 1 minute, 4 or 5 times a day. And during that 1 minute, you do some deep breathing. 4 seconds in, 4-second hold, 6 seconds out. Have a big glass of water. You now have a 5-minute daily self-care practice of breath work, and water and hydration can have such a huge impact mentally, physiologically. And so just remember, this is not a one and done. This isn't a journey, or, it's not just a destination. It's a journey. It's something that's going to take some time and some practice. But by taking some of these small steps every day, you can prioritize your well-being and your self-care to help prevent and recover from burnout. And that's it. I know that was a ton.
There was absolutely loads to take in, Daniela. Could you also share your links onto the chat as well, please, if people would like to save it? Yes, or take a picture of this if anybody would want that. That's good as well. I mean, this
is a good screenshot. Let me get it.
You have actually. Yeah, Nash has been, thank you, Nash, for joining in. She's been trying to get it for ages, and finally she has got it. Well done to you. Well done. But it was amazing, Daniela, what you shared around self-care and avoiding how we can keep burnout away from us, and how we can deal with it, unfortunately, if we do hit it. I'm sure it resonates with many women who work, and they work around the clock, especially moms like yourself who are working full-time moms, also have to, look after the children, the home. And I think one thing that you touched upon that resonates with me personally a lot, as well as probably with many other people, is the shame and the guilt aspect of, taking a break, setting boundaries. If I do this, am I being a good mother, kind of a thing? Am I being selfish if I'm taking time out for myself? So yeah, ladies, it's our time to ask questions. Thank you so much, Daniela, for that. That was very useful and helpful. So if anybody wants to ask any questions, please feel free to do so.
When you talked about, feeling guilty, the other part is we're modeling for our kids how to take care of ourselves, how to make ourselves a priority, what self-care looks like. When my son was in middle school, I came home from work one day. He had made me this tray with like homemade hummus and some little candles on it. And he's like, Mom, you've had a rough week. You need to take care of yourself. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's watching. They're absorbing everything we do more than we say. So when we practice self-care, we show them you matter.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're right. They are going to eventually model what we show them rather than what we tell them.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. So we're giving them a message of self-care when we do it for ourselves, which is very important.
As well as just that we're important. I think if we don't take care of ourselves, they won't take care of us in that same way. They'll treat us as poorly as we treat ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any questions? Anything anybody would like to say? Please feel free to say that now.
So sorry, I missed it.
It's okay, Nash. we've recorded the whole thing and it will be available. I'll send you the link, but it will be on the website anyways.
I was determined to fight this. I don't know.
Well done. You didn't give up. Well done. That's amazing.
I don't know what I was pressing. I don't know.
Technology is its own stress.
It's okay. It's okay. Do you want to ask anything? Do you want to say anything, Nash?
Self-care, wasn't it? It was about self-care, wasn't it? I'm still trying to self-care myself at the moment, as you know, Ritu. But I will have a look at the link and really.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah.
No,
and you've got Daniela's links on there.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful.
Thank you. Sorry, Danielle.
Oh, no problem. No problem. No, like I said, we just kind of need to give ourselves grace as well, that life is going to happen. Things are going to come up, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Carol says she can't unmute her mic and also cannot open her video. Oh, my days, Carol.
Oh.
That's not right. We would love to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so unlike you. I don't know. Okay. No worries. No worries. Okay then. Daniela, is there anything else you'd like to conclude with?
No, thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any questions, definitely connect with me. Send me an email, follow me on social media. I share a lot of this information, especially on my Instagram channel, on LinkedIn, but also I have a lot of free resources on my website. I have a podcast, Bestie Life with Daniela, and a blog. So you'll get a lot of this information, but feel free to reach out through those programs, as well as if there's opportunities to work with me if you're interested in any of that.
Wonderful. Charlene, I believe you can unmute yourself. I have not on my settings. I don't control the mute settings. And I've asked you to unmute anyways. Can you do that? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording and we'll be here for another couple of minutes if anybody wants to unmute and come in. Okay. Okay, thank you guys for being with us. No, I'm just doing it for the recording purpose. Thank you for being with us and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.